With today's questionable agricultural practices and genetically engineered foods, wouldn't you be happier knowing where your food came from and what went into growing it? You can when you garden with Green Thumb Gardening and Hydroponics. From seed to harvest, you are in control of what you eat and feed your family. 365 days a year. Stop in and taste for yourself. It's simply fun, nutritious, educational, and easy to do. The whole family can be involved. So see what the gardener in you has been missing. Go ahead and get hooked on Ponics today.
We recently had the opportunity to visit American Flatbread at Laurel Farm. During our visit, we had the pleasure of sitting down with owner and founder, George Shank, to discuss American Flatbread and its place in Vermont's history and culture.
I started Flatbread on my hands and knees. In the fall of 1984, we went to France, and there I saw a large wood-fired stone oven, and that was really an epiphany. By the spring of 1985, it occurred to me how I might be able to build a very simple stone oven down on the ground. The oven that I had built was sort of U-shaped with a fire underneath and then a flat stone and then another U on top of that and then another flat stone. And in early June of 1987, I started building the oven, and it was just sort of a blown up or larger version of the simple ovens that I had been building before on the ground. The restaurant at Tucker Hill, the Flatbread restaurant, grew. We started off one night a week on Wednesday nights. The very first night we did 21 people, which I declared to be an enormous success. We started to realize on the frozen flatbread idea. The idea there was, let's bake flatbread when we're not busy, we'll freeze it and sell it into the marketplace. We finally got the product into the Hurons in January of 1990. We made 24 flatbreads. I had forgotten that the boxes of flatbread were going to need a case to go into, and so then we had this pile of 24 flatbreads in a white box and bringing them down to the Hurons in a garbage bag, and Tom Huron is looking at it because, oh, you guys have a lot to learn. We imagined that those 24 flatbreads were going to be what Hurons would require for the week. Tommy Huron called up the next day and said that I sold out the 24 in 3 hours and that he needed 110 for the following weekend. So then we created a specific baking shift during the day to bake off the flatbreads for the grocery store trade. By early 1991, it became obvious that if we were ever going to grow the frozen component of the business, that we needed to find a different location. And a friend of mine, Artie Bennett, said that Dan and Sue Easley's of Laurel Farm might be interested in tenants for this space. We spoke with them, and they said, yeah, they would be willing to rent to us. So we built this oven in June of 1991 and started the wholesale baking in July of 1992. I think there were 4 or 5 employees at that point in time. and we were baking probably 200 to 400 flatbreads a week. The following year, we were doing the restaurant at Tucker Hill Lodge as we had been. We were doing that 5 days a week now, Monday through Friday. We were doing the wholesale baking here at Laurel Farm. In May of '92, the oven at Tucker Hill collapsed. We decided to bring the restaurant component of the business here to Laurel Farm. The very first night that we did that, more people came here than had ever come to Tucker Hill Lodge. Laurel Farm has been a fantastic home for American flatbread, for both the wholesale production and the restaurant ever since. The wholesale component grew, the restaurant grew over the years. It's been a nice journey. We have gotten to the point where we've actually outgrown Laurel Farm, and the next step is we are exploring building a bakery here in the Mad River Valley that will allow us to bake some more flatbread and also to bake it more efficiently. The faces of food. There's 5 faces of food. The first being hunger, the most fundamental thing that food needs to do. It needs to satisfy our hunger. If we are hungry, genuinely hungry, we can't do anything else. There wouldn't ever be any art. There wouldn't ever be any poetry. We wouldn't build anything if we were consumed by our hunger. Food needs to taste good to our mouths. We won't let it pass our lips unless it accepts the dormant, in a way, of our palate. Food needs to nourish us. The chemistry of food is important as the building blocks and the energy that it provides us. Interestingly, I find flavor to be more fundamental than the nourishing part, because it is obvious that we eat lots of things that taste good to us that aren't necessarily good for us. Those 3 faces represent the physical components of food. The next 2 faces are more metaphysical in nature. The 4th face of food is what I call nurture. Food has the ability to nurture us, to comfort us. A good way to understand that is to remember how we feel about a really wonderful meal that we've had amongst family or friends. How we there's an afterglow, if you will, from it all. Or how we think about the prospects of a great meal that coming evening or coming week. It kind of brings a sense of peace and joy and comfort to our lives that is enormously helpful in the human experience, enriching the human experience. The final face of food is what I call heal. And I believe that food has the ability to heal us. It is not that I think that food is a substitute for traditional allopathic medicine, more that it has the ability to act in consort with allopathic medicine. That it seems like an obvious tool in the work of helping us get better. The dedications are an interesting piece to flatbread. They started at the very first night that we were open at Tucker Hill Lodge in July of '87. As I was thinking about how I had gotten from here to there and how flatbread had started, but I realized that although I was getting an awful lot of the credit for starting flatbread, that I had not done it alone, that many people had contributed to helping me get this far. And that I thought of the dedications originally as a vehicle for acknowledging those contributions and of saying thank you. After I had gone through that initial list, I realized that the forum had sort of taken on a life of its own, suggested an opportunity to talk about sort of this relationship between good food and good health and a healthy environment. And it was obvious how our food ties in squarely with what kind of environment we have and our own personal health. and what are the personal joys. So the next phase was exploring those issues. The format also suggested an opportunity to write about pure fiction. And I developed a series of stories that whose central character was what I call Little Square, which is sort of a spirit being that had these wonderful adventures. And so there were Little Square and Dancing Square stories, which tied in with another component that became a recurring theme in dedications, which was this whole idea of spirit. And they really are reflective of my own sort of spiritual quest and journey. A lot of the statements on the walls come out of the dedications, and that's usually the place where they're first put down. And what I realized was that by putting our story up on the walls, and first of all, we didn't have a budget for art, so we just kind of made it up ourselves as best we could, and there was a kind of innocence about it, I suppose. The writing has, I think, a very unrefined, I hope an innocent aspect to it. There are misspelled words, there are poorly constructed sentences. What I discovered was, what was sort of curious, is that a lot of it was really done more for something that was going on inside of me. And I put it in a public place, but I didn't really think very many people were going to care very much. But it was helpful to me for my own growth and experience. It is unusual for a person who cooks for a living to have an opportunity to write in conjunction with their work. And I feel quite lucky to have had that chance. What happened was that I found that some people were interested. I would say that the vast majority don't read the stuff, and that's okay. What is wonderful is that some do, and that for some it means something to them, and that's great. Lucky me to have that experience. There is an artist on our staff. She's a master baker, Jan Broder, and she does a lot of the paintings with the extra virgin olive oils and the herbs. And one of the things that we found was that the paintings can be a way of communicating your message. So if your message is good, local, sustainable food, then how do you get that message out? And the banners become a way of decorating the space and communicating the message. The community piece to American Flatbread also grew organically and has had implications to the nature of the company that I did not understand and could have not foreseen. I think it started off sort of innocently. It started off as from a genuine sense of, this is my home, and how do I responsibly interact with my home? And that I hear the genuine call or the needs for different individuals, and I see the good that they do, or the righteousness of their cause, and I wanted to help in any way that I could. And often that way was small, but I felt that it was important to do something. I found, curiously, was that as we invested in others, others invested in us. And as we tried to strengthen the community in turn strengthened our business. And it's wonderful for us to be more involved with our communities. That when we have like the local church group here that was raising money for the steeple, I got to see the members of their congregation come together over a meal that was our meal. I saw their joy and their smiles. I saw and I heard their thank yous. They left a little bit different, but I'll tell you what, I left different too. That instead of just having a night and just being open for business and sort of counting the money or thinking about the business stuff, my work was elevated also because I got to have my work as part of a larger purpose that transcended just being a pizzeria. In the end, this is about making the very best food that we can imagine and that our abilities allow us. It's about trying to find ways to create work that's meaningful, that people enjoy. It's and that they're paid fairly for. It's about being a voice for sustainable agriculture and for nature, for the indigenous peoples of the world. It is about being a member of our community, a real member, an interactive member of our community. It's about being an educational resource to our community to the best of our ability. It is about laughing and being of goodwill and forgiving. And it's about doing these things in ways that are responsible to the economic needs of the company so that that piece also is sustainable.
We meet with Arthur Schulmendine at his Jericho home, where he teaches cooking classes and whips up scrumptious treats. If you find it hard to keep yourself from the snacks during the show, it's Arthur's fault.
Started making the sauces for some of the local health food stores. And it was a joke. I was doing this actually at Christmas time for the family, doing up truffles and different types of candies and the sauces and hot fudge. And my sister-in-law and my wife kind of conspired to blame me for their lack of willpower. So the name came about in '92 or so. It's Arthur's fault. And it progressed from there, but I had an accident that laid me up for a while, severely fractured my arm. And then my wife was commuting to San Francisco, and they offered her the opportunity to move out there and for our entire family to go out for a year. And since I was not really able to actively pursue the cooking at that point, I figured, yeah, it'd be great to take a year off, have the kids enjoy San Francisco, so we went. 3 years later, we moved back. But while I was out there, I started doing a little bit of catering for friends, and the classes started because they were all interested in how to make truffles and candies, and so we started doing a Christmas time candy making class. Then we got back here, we started up and redesigned this kitchen. Almost a year ago we did the paperwork and got licensed and got legal, and the kickoff was for the Champlain Valley Folk Festival, where we were one of the food vendors, and it went very well. We sold out of 90% of everything we made. My interests are Asian, French, Italian, primarily, with my own slant, taking the techniques of the different ethnicities and putting them into the others and other recipes. The peanut sauce is also one of my specialties. Eventually I would like to contract out and have it done commercially. setting up a kitchen to do that myself would be even more expensive than just the cost of doing the batches. But we're talking a fairly intensive capital requirement to do that. So that's down the road a piece. But that's the eventual goal. Friends in San Francisco expressed interest in wanting to learn how to do this. And heard about, we talked about doing things at the holiday time, and they really wanted to do it. And so word of mouth spread, and that I was going to have a class. We figured if I was going to teach some people, why not make it a structured class instead of just having friends over. And so we had some friends, but also other people that were acquaintances that came in to learn the techniques. And we kind of went overboard out there because, one, they were friends, and because we didn't know any better at the time. We started out giving each person a 11-pound block of chocolate, which makes upwards of 600 truffles. Each? Yes. So people were, went home with, 20, 30 pounds of, exactly, of candies, caramels, whatever. Yeah. So now we've got it scaled back. The Easter class, they went home with 4 to 5 pounds, which is not that difficult to do. At Christmas, it was 10 to 15 pounds. One thing I found was that the cost of hand forming the chocolates and dipping them and everything is very expensive. I mean, that's where all the cost is for it. The ganache is relatively easy to make. And the dipping is time consuming, lots of pans, etc., space to chill them. So I just poured it into jars and started selling it that way. And gave instructions how to make truffles, so you could take it out and just take a spoonful, make one, and either roll it in cocoa, like the original truffle, or dip it in chocolate and do a few up for a party, so that you had eliminated one step of it. And then we discovered that 90% of the people buying the sauces were just keeping it in the fridge, coming home from work, and getting a chocolate hit. They're fixed for the night. And all the instructions for, how to warm it gently so that the cocoa butter doesn't float to the surface, and the cream that's emulsified was for naught. Very rarely did people actually melt the sauce up.
Right.
So, and the espresso sauce that you tried, that's just a truffle filling, chocolate ganache. The courses not only don't teach you how to make a dish. I think the biggest thing that I've done in the classes is allow the people to think for themselves in the kitchen. We have some people that are very comfortable with that, but we also have people that come in and expect me to tell them if it tastes right. And I never want to do that. I want people to start thinking for themselves and think how they want it to taste. So that if they're putting in a liqueur and a batch of truffles in their ganache for flavor, that they taste it and it's to the point where they like it. If they want it in the background, if they don't want a heavy Grand Marnier flavor, then fine. If they do want it, fine. And learn how to deal with what they want. In a stir-fry class, Asian cooking technique class, taught them how to debone a chicken breast. And then once you debone it, how to take the bones and then make a stock out of it. We thought originally we could do 8, but we found that was way too many. So we've backed it off to 6. And with no shows, we generally have 4 to 5. which is a nice, comfortable size. Right here in the kitchen. That's in redoing the kitchen design. That was the plan, to make it a teaching space. We weren't sure how many we could accommodate, how much workspace there would be, but it turns out that it does fairly well. We only have one restaurant stove, so that has limited space, but we break it up. For the candy making class, we have 1 or 2 people that take care of making the caramel, and they spend their time doing that while they may share in some of the other candies somebody else makes. And then other people can look in or take a minute to see what's going on, but they're responsible for making a batch of caramel for the entire class. For me, my presentation skills are lacking, but I always try to make sure that the flavor and the quality is there, and so that's never lacking. But you know, it's a whole philosophy, and also never wanting to waste things. You know, so all the scraps go into the stock. Always do the compost so that it's a full cycle. A lot of this is foundational stuff for larger things to come. Having the food contracted out for production, website sales, larger catering events, classes year-round. Make people happy. Let them enjoy food and the friendship that it can bring, and the community that it can foster. You know, breaking bread has always brought people together, so let's have the best bread we can make to do that, so that everybody's happy and nobody's complaining or feeling that, you know, this is not that great a bread. I think that's the main thing.
With today's questionable agricultural practices and genetically engineered foods, wouldn't you be happier knowing where your food came from and what went into growing it? You can when you garden with Green Thumb Gardening and Hydroponics. From seed to harvest, you're in control of what you eat and feed your family. 365 days a year. Stop in and taste for yourself. It's simply fun, nutritious, educational, and easy to do. The whole family can be involved. So see what the gardener in you has been missing. Go ahead and get hooked on Ponics today.